protect our children from child sex trafficking with a citizen initiative to ensure perpetrators never have a second chance to brutalize another child. Our ballot measure sets a penalty of life in prison without parole for anyone who buys or sells a minor child for sex.
It's time to protect girls in sports from bigger and stronger males with a citizen initiative that protects female athletes' dignity, safety, and opportunity. Our ballot measure requires athletic leagues and teams be specifically designated male, female, or co-ed.
It's time to protect our children from irreversible sex change with a citizen initiative that protects their reproductive future and our tax dollars. Our ballot measure prohibits irreversible sex change surgery on minor children aged 17 and younger.
Voter-enacted common sense protections for our children.
But these three ballot measures will happen without you.
Please join us and do your part so our children can have a better and brighter future.
It's time. Protect our children, Colorado.
Welcome everyone, good evening. My name is Erin Lee, I'm the Executive Director of Protect Kids Colorado. These are our 2026 ballot measures, and we are so honored to partner tonight with Colorado Principal Physicians, Dr. Travis Morrell, to welcome you all here tonight. PKC is a nonpartisan, broad coalition of parents, grandparents, and concerned citizens coming together to safeguard children and strengthen families. Protect Kids is truly made up of people from all walks of life. Absolutely everyone is welcome in this movement, though our founders and leadership are all unabashedly Christian. We are a spirit-led effort, and we start every meeting with prayer. So I would like to welcome up Pastor Joe Seaton of this beautiful church, who so graciously opened their doors for us tonight to bless this evening and open us in prayer.
Will you pray with me? Heavenly Father, we come before you today as your people, and we're grateful for your goodness. We are dependent on your wisdom, and we're confident in the love that you have for every person you've made. Lord, we recognize tonight that you're the creator who has formed us fearfully and wonderfully. We know that you've knit us together with purpose and design and dignity. And tonight, Lord, we recognize that you care deeply for children. You welcome them, you bless them, and you warn us never to lead them astray. And so, Father, I pray that tonight this gathering would be in honor of protecting what you have called precious. Lord, we want to guard the hearts and minds and bodies of the young ones that you've entrusted to our care. Father, in a world that's filled with confusion and competing voices and pressures that overwhelm, Lord, we ask for clarity tonight and for courage, as well as for compassion. Lord, would you give us wisdom to speak the truth in love? Give us the strength to stand firm when it's easier to stay silent. And Father, give us the tenderness to reflect the heart of your Son Christ in all we do. And so, Father, we pray for our kids. We pray for the parents. We pray for the leaders. And Father, we also pray for those who are struggling with identity and confusion or pain. Lord, I pray that they would encounter not rejection, but redemption that's found in your Son. I pray that you would lead them to healing, that you would draw them to your compassion. And I pray, Father, that they would know that you are the Lord who sees every wounded heart and does offer wholeness and forgiveness in new life. Above all, Lord, I pray that everything that's done this evening would be marked by truth, guided by your wisdom, and saturated with your mercy. May the words that are said bring honor to you, and our actions reflect your character. And I pray that the outcome of this, the fruit of this gathering, Lord, would be protection and clarity and hope. Father, this time belongs to you, and we ask your blessing on it. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you, Pastor Joe. Real quick, I know we have some elected officials and school leaders here in the audience tonight. So if that's you, would you please just stand and be recognized for taking the time to be here tonight? I know we have our sheriff, state representatives. And I encourage people to talk to your local elected officials who are fighting the same fight under the Golden Dome and in their classrooms. Well, in addition to having the privilege of leading Protect Kids Colorado, I'm also a mom of 3 here in Larimer County who rescued my little girl, 12 years old, from grooming in the Poudre School District that led to wrong sex confusion. It was exactly 2 years ago yesterday, actually, right here in this church, that we premiered a film called Art Club about my family's story. I encourage you all to watch it. It's available for free at artclubmovie.com. And it was created by our president and founder of Protect Kids Colorado, Senator Kevin Lundberg. Well, the good news for my family is that we got our daughter off of what I call the classroom to clinic pipeline. And that's what it is. It starts in the classroom with pornography disguised as lessons, destigmatization, pronoun conversation, secret gender transitions. It was the scariest year of our entire lives, getting our daughter out of the cult. And that's what it is, it's a cult. Now we're able to speak out because we're on the other side. But tonight is about those who did not get off the conveyor belt, who did not make it out before having their healthy bodies mutilated. Tonight is about understanding how in the world we got to this place as a society where everyone seems to either willingly go along with it or completely turn a blind eye to the wrong sex mutilation of children. Children's Hospital here in Colorado ranks number 10 in wrong sex butchery of children. It's actually under investigation right now by the FBI and the DOJ for child mutilation. Last I checked, and Dr. Travis can confirm, a confirmed 64 hospitals in the state of Colorado perform chemical and surgical harm on children's healthy bodies. Someone who can explain firsthand is my co-host, Dr. Travis Morrell. I call him Colorado's doctor because Travis was the first Colorado physician to publicly speak out against the chemical and surgical mutilation of gender-confused kids. Please. With 2 young sons and a newborn daughter at home, Dr. Morrell sacrificed everything to tell the truth when no one else would. He knew his private practice could be attacked, and it has been, but he did it anyway. Travis is a trusted resource for every family and detransitioner who needs support. He's a fierce fighter at the Capitol, a senior fellow at Do No Harm, the founder and chair of Colorado Principled Physicians. He somehow also finds time to be a very hardworking volunteer for the Protect Kids petitions, and he is a kind, honest, and caring friend. With the support of his beautiful family, Travis sacrifices and literally drops everything to help everyone all the time. He's an unsung hero, and I'm proud to call him my friend. Please welcome Colorado's doctor, Dr. Travis Morrell.
Good evening, I am Dr. Travis Morrell, and I hope everything she said was nice. I don't listen when she talks about me because she purposely tries to get me to cry, which is not very hard to do when you're talking about what we're talking about tonight. I represent Colorado Principled Physicians, and I'm proud that several other doctors are here today, and many other doctors in this state represent evidence-based medicine and classical liberal values. I see several doctors and parents that we like to support and that we love in the audience tonight. Thank you. Thank you also to Dayspring Christian Church for being brave enough and principled enough to welcome us here tonight so we can have this talk. I'm ashamed to say that not every pastor in church, not every doctor, not every parent, not every teacher has that record. So I'm very appreciative of that. I know that some of you have questions. You have a doctor here tonight, and you have a couple questions. I'll try to answer some of them. One is this really happening? Is this, pinch me? Am I asleep? Is this real? Is it really true that when I was a kid, and you had a friend in high school maybe that had anorexia, and they went to the doctor, and they're starving themselves because they're confused about what they're supposed to look like. Maybe they've had trauma, they're confused, they're stressed, and they go to the doctor. The doctor never took liposuction to them or never gave them Ozempic and tried to make the problem worse. Maybe you had a kid, a friend, a nephew, a niece that maybe cut themselves to feel something, and they had nowhere else to turn, and they picked up this habit, and they're harming themselves, scarring themselves. And when they go to the doctor, at least the doctor tries to help them. Is it really the case that in Colorado in 2025, that there are hospitals that advertise for 16-year-olds to have their breasts permanently removed and replaced with scars, functional bonding methods for mothers and babies, the future choice of offspring and reproduction of these young women. Is it true that we're really taking that away before they're even 18? Is it true that they go to the doctor and they're confused and they're hurt? Maybe they've been molested or abused. Maybe people are making fun of them, or they have bad ideas about what their body image should be like from all the things in our culture. Is it true that when they go to the doctor's turning the knife around and putting it on them and profiting from it? Is that true? Is it true that private clinics in this state were advertising permanent removal of young girls' breasts at 15 this year? Is it true that Governor Jared Polis signed a bill mandating that every insurance company has to cover this and there's no age limits? It is true. And that's why you're here tonight. The next question you ask is then, why are all the doctors going along with this? Why would someone that's an adult, any adult, every grandmother in this room, and every grandmother that every grandmother has had knows that you got to grow up. Maybe between 10 and 20, you develop things, and it's uncomfortable and it's awkward. And unfortunately, many people, especially men, are guilty of hurting women in that young age and girls in that young age. It makes it harder. But is it true that doctors don't realize that kids need that time and those hormones for their brains to develop? Women aren't just breasts, there's your brains and your bone. Is it true that doctors are going along with this? I want to tell you a story that I hope you read in the Wall Street Journal a year ago, but a year and a half ago, I submitted a policy to a major medical organization in Colorado. And I asked Colorado's doctors, I said, look, for years we've known we don't need a study that permanently scarring a girl is harmful. We've attacked this in other countries like Yemen and Sudan. And we didn't need a study. We knew it was bad. Every adult knows it's bad. And I said, this is the same thing we're doing that's different, but it's the same principle. Some of the same things are technically done to these kids. Don't you guys think this is wrong? I showed the studies. Do you know that every high-level study, every systematic review, there's no evidence that this is helpful or that it's safe? And there's many studies that show harm, that the mental damage, the decrease in your memory never recovers to our knowledge. And do you know how many people in Colorado, how many doctors voted to protect kids within the organization? Blue Colorado. How many do you think? 0. What else? Not many. 3. It was 62% of doctors would be right up here with me right now. 62%. And I want to be clear that I didn't say we should study it more or something. I said this is mutilation. It's a federal crime. 62% said that. If I had worded it more gently, it probably would have been higher. Now, so why didn't anything come of that? Well, you probably already know. It's the same as your schools, some of your churches, all of your colleges. Our organizations have been hijacked, and Dr. Lindsay is going to talk about that later tonight for us. But what I want you to know is that Colorado's doctors are with you. We're trying, and that's why we started Colorado Doctors, Colorado Principled Physicians. But I want you to know that we've failed. We have failed to police our profession. In fairness, you have failed too. Your legislator in Denver is horrible, although many people present accepted. But we have failed, and I'm sorry, and we're sorry, and we're going to do what we can. But the truth is that it is going to come down to you to stop it. We will not stop it without you. And that's why you're here tonight, because Erin Lee and the senator they have started Protect Kids Colorado so that you guys can have this opportunity with your own friends, 20 or 40 friends, that you can get signatures to stop this harm from the kids. And this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity in a blue state, in the heart of the beast, to show that Americans want to protect their kids. And we are with you, and I want you to take advantage of this great opportunity. Thank you for your time and for listening. Thank you. It's now my great privilege, my great honor to introduce a friend of mine. Her name is Antoinette de la Cruz. Antoinette was harmed. I would go further with stronger words to say what happened to her as a young adult after learning that so-called trans was a good option for her even as a kid, as a teen in an after-school program. She's well-spoken. She's very brave. She's the first detransitioner in Colorado to speak publicly. We have to understand that it's not easy to get up here and talk. People that come up here lose all their friends. They often lose their family. But she's dedicated in the same way as you are, that she wants to stop this so that kids have their future. That we would have a world where when a kid comes to you with confusion, that we would accept them and love them and help them walk through it with them. So please give a round of applause and your warm welcome to Miss Antoinette de la Cruz.
Good evening. I'm going to read. Can you guys hear me? Or just pull it down? Or I'll leave it to the gentleman. So I wrote something, so I'm going to have to read it from here if you guys don't mind.
I'll get the mic for you.
Thank you. Is that better? All right, perfect. Thank you. So good evening again. When I transitioned, I was 20 and not even 25 when my brain would have been fully developed, but not a child, not without some life lived. Although mental health could have been a priority much sooner back then, therapists didn't know what they didn't know. Did psychotherapy predict a mental illness would become an identity, much less a religion? No, they didn't see that coming. I don't think they knew their livelihoods would be on the line if they acted with curiosity in the best interest of their client. Nor did parents ever foresee the state creating laws that would mirror an abuser's pattern of behavior, such as preventing any real support, a difference of opinion, manipulative behavior, and a multitude of threats. That kind of sounds like coercive control, doesn't it? That kind of sounds like they're projecting their toxicity onto the ones they accuse of doing what they themselves are actually doing. We have adults that have passed on their delusions and confabulations to their children and even to children who aren't their own. Transgenderism has been rebranded multiple times to be more palatable and less threatening. Its first official title in the DSM-5 was gender identity disorder. Then identity disorder was replaced with dysphoria to destigmatize the illness. It's a disorder. It's an illness of the mind, and today we celebrate it instead of treating it as we should. Per current laws concerning minors, they cannot truly consent to this, as they simply lack the life experience to weigh out their decisions fully and how those decisions will impact them in the future. Could you imagine cheering on or celebrating any other disorders with the same vigor as this one? To further my point, but not make light of these examples, major depressive disorder. Hey Tom, way to stay low, almost at rock bottom. Bipolar disorder. Stacy, feeling that mania, when's the crash? And substance abuse disorder. Hey Hal, I got a great doctor in mind that could get you flying higher than these gas prices in no time. That would be insanely cruel. It's cruel that someone with a mental disorder is encouraged to chemically alter and mutilate their bodies to become sterilized and then celebrate that. It took me almost 2 decades with zero direction to figure out what I suffered from and then to heal from that. But once I did, the healing was almost immediate. The epiphanies and then the rage. For what's the point of a Hippocratic oath if they won't uphold it? What's the point to ethics if they won't practice those principles in their professions? When did it become cool and compassionate to exacerbate someone's pain and illness? This ideology has opened many channels for this sickness to mutate, thrive, and spread within our own state of Colorado. It's like having a cut on your ankle and standing in sewage water. The cut becomes infected, and if ignored, which this clearly has been ignored, once manageable infection will soon become life-threatening. Limbs will be lost, organs will shut down, and the body as a whole will die from the collapse within. Women's space is violated and no longer safe. Women's sports and opportunities stolen by men posing as women. The infection is spreading. Children being trans as young as the single digits. Their healthy bodies destroyed and mutilated, there goes the limbs. Developing and existing endocrine systems destroyed and damaged. The infection is seriously damaging vital organs and starting to shut them down. Innocence groomed and innocence lost, mental illness left untreated, the infection is almost in our bloodstream. Next is most certainly death. The urgency is real and not over-exaggerated. This is one of the most important times in recent history. We must stand up for these kiddos because they have no real life experience to fight mentally ill adults. Adults who have adults who have a lot of experience with their toxic behaviors and wishes to promote dissociation. These adults are damaged and broken people who choose not to be honest with themselves. I'm a detransitioner who was able to be honest with herself. And when I was presented with new facts, my mind changed as any adult's mind should. When I learned about the fraudulent proclamations of transgender success and how that has become the ideology you see before you today angered me, especially if you think success is based off a one-person study that resulted in 2 deaths. His suicide and his twin brother since he acted as the control in the study. What good science do you know of ever was based off of one study with one person, one control that resulted in a 100% death rate? There is still a lot of work to be done, but the children must be protected now. Their innocence protected, their wholeness protected. We must do that now. Without any real preventions of this illness, it could take close to a decade to realize the error. It took me almost 2 decades to realize the error. And for most, this will be the case, long after the permanent damage has occurred. Minors cannot consent to this. I have compassion and empathy for the sick. I was sick too, and for a long time. But transitioning didn't fix anything, and it didn't make me feel more like myself. It just delayed the inevitable. Now I feel more like myself despite the losses. But how prevention and treatment could have changed my life then. How prevention and treatment can change a child's life now. But a good starting point is not allowing children under 18 to have these major life-changing surgeries. Thank you. Thank you. Our children's future isn't for the sacrificial altar of misguided egos, perversions of the mentally ill, or of the ill-informed. Until mental wellness is pushed to the forefront to understand this sickness and why this particular one has emerged in our society as it has, and an aggressive yet compassionate effort towards treatment are in place, I fear that we will continue to see children being sacrificed in the name of gender-affirmative care. This has proven to cause more damage physically and mentally and has even resulted in death. This isn't care. You cannot call it care, much less medicine, but here we are. We are barely learning how gender affirmative care impacts individuals in the short term, and we know even less about the long term, but what we do know is tragic enough. Detransitioners like myself are the heretics of the trans cult, and I stand strong in the truth I reclaimed, that I'm a woman and transitioning isn't a real thing. We do exist, but most are afraid to speak, and rightfully so. But we should be given consideration to share our heresy and excommunications from the trans cult, to be encouraged to be brave and to speak up with support, to give a difference of experience, insight, maybe a way to heal, or even a way out. We stand with you, the parents and the guardians, the protectors and the advocates. These signatures really matter. Getting out there and having the hard conversations, standing your ground matters because these kids matter. I cannot convey to you in a tangible way the suffering that I have felt, the unimaginable pain mentally, emotionally, and physically that I have endured throughout this process. But I choose to make it meaningful by sharing my story whenever I can. I was rushed through this process even then. I experienced a lack of integrity even then. From insurance fraud to misplaced compassion over required ethics, a botched surgery, an emergency surgery, corrective surgeries, having a machine breathe for me, and dying twice. I convinced myself that these were rites of passage, especially when I went past points of no return along the way. When I got deeper in it, it was harder to get out. It was harder to admit mistakes were made. It was clear the integrity suffered then, but now it's become predatory and even easier to start. I'm telling you this doesn't work from experience, and it's left me with more damage to repair than I started with. It's time to reclaim Colorado's sensibility as a state that protects its children, a state that upholds the well-being and wholeness of all of its residents, from our elders to our youngest citizens, and to lead rooted in reality. Our state has lost its way, but your love will bring light to the darkness and light the path back to reality. The love for your children agitates this cult in all the best ways. So let's continue that, shall we? Thank you. I hear the sick ones say loudly that we're denying trans people's right to existence. We aren't denying your existence, rather the opposite. Personality disorders exist, neurodevelopmental disorders, eating disorders, mood disorders, depressive disorders, trauma disorders, and substance abuse disorders exist. We aren't denying your existence, but all claim the only thing you're being denied is the right to actual treatment, ethical and scientifically based treatment, and that's the truth. We must end this violence on children, end this cultural psychosis, and get back Colorado's soul. Thank you.
Wow. She is a short hero, but a hero. A few years ago, I think it was my brother actually sent me a video of this mom in California, also named Erin, describing the story of her daughter being captured by the gender cult and the fight to get her out. Our stories were nearly identical, and as I realize now, the story is always eerily similar. Over time, I became an Erin Friday fangirl as I watched her confront the California legislature, take on Scott Wiener and Gavin Newsom, help so many through her organization, Our Duty, run citizens' ballot measures through Protect Kids California, and yes, we did absolutely rip off her organization's logo and name. Like Dr. Morrell, Erin works harder behind the scenes than anyone will ever know. She's behind a lot of the amazing things you see happening in the Trump administration. She supports families all over the country. She shows up for the big things and the small. She never asks for credit or takes a paycheck. Erin Friday is by far the smarter, harder working, more inspiring Erin. She's a godsend to me and to the state of Colorado, even though you all didn't even know it yet. Please welcome the president of Our Duty, Erin Friday.
Something about that name, Erin. We are warriors. Thank you, other Erin, younger, prettier Erin. Before I get into my presentation, I want to just briefly share my personal story. Like Erin Lee, my daughter, too, was secretly socially transitioned at her school by teachers who, incidentally, had never met her because the school was shut down because of COVID. When I caught them and I laid into them, I was told that the school needed to be a safe space for my then 13-year-old daughter to be her authentic self. The school couldn't define the word safe, but they made it clear that I was unsafe. As a few days later, Child Protective Services showed up at my door, followed by the police. I unenrolled my daughter from the school, and she eventually returned to being comfortable in her female body. That process took years and was the darkest time of my life. During that process, as she was getting better, I searched for the white knights who would protect our children. But soon I realized that no one was coming to help us. We, all of you, are the white knights. For 5 years now, I've been fighting to protect our kids with no paycheck at a loss of more than $1 million. So tonight, I'm asking you to sign the petitions, volunteer to collect signatures, and donate as much as you can, because even with President Trump's help, it is we who will save our children and women in the blue states. All right, I'm going to try to make this work. I'm not sure. Which button? Bottom? Sorry. partner, Erin, come up. Oh, it wasn't me. I feel so much better. Phew.
Super job. As a parent of a trans child and a professional scientist, I strongly support the standard. Knowledge is power. Schools are supposed to empower all students. Knowledge is power. The most reliable source of knowledge is science. So I'm sorry, parents do not know best. Scientists know the best. Experts know the best. So I strongly support the standard and to enable and empower all students to feel safe, educated, knowing who they are, knowing that it's okay to be who they are. Thank you for listening.
So you guys all groaned at the right spot where he said, parents don't know best. He, a scientist, so-called, stranger, knows better than the parent. But he's not even bright enough to acknowledge that humans come in only two forms, male and female. So this is my nemesis, Scott Wiener. Such a great name, isn't it? Yeah, they're relatives, for sure. So Scott Wiener, who doesn't have children, he is a part of the LGBTQ caucus. And in this clip, he is saying that all the children in California are his kids. They are our kids, is what he said in that clip. And he called parents like me who want to raise their children as their sex as nasty. He is beyond reprehensible and even fought for a bill that would make it a felony to sex traffic a 16-year-old. He fought that bill, stating that it would be unfair to punish an adult who offers a 16-year-old $20 in exchange for a sex act. I could spend hours revealing what this predacious man has done to harm women and children, but I have to save that for another day. But just know that the goal of the Democrats is to sexualize our children and to take them away from families who oppose it. We are moving towards, no, actually we are there, where parents get to parent their kids until around the age of 12, and then states like Colorado and California will snatch them away. States like California are rehousing children whose parents refuse to consent, thank you, to sex-rejecting interventions on their children. In California, we have unicorn homes. This is where a 14-year-old can run away from their non-affirming parents and find new supporting parents. 14. And who do they house these kids with? Trans-identified, chosen families. I'm trying. I don't know what's happening. I'm getting the laser to go. Point it back there. Feel like I'm shooting you. That's all right. Oh, that was it. Okay. This is a screenshot from Trevor Project, who states publicly that its mission is to prevent youth suicides. But then why does it lead distressed children to its online clubs, such as the Trans Club, the Sex Trafficking Club, the Finding Friends Club, the Furry Club, and the Age Regression Club? I joined Trevor's chat rooms. There we go. I joined there's an age limit of 24 I know I look young and everything, but there was no age verification, so anybody can join the chat rooms. And in this one, they are having a conversation, and this is the polyamorous club. And they're having a conversation saying, I'm looking for someone between the ages of 17 and 18, and we'll just start out as friends first. Our governor requires that the Trevor Project be put on every student's ID. Yep, that passed. So when he's running for president, remember that. So this is what we're up against. Queer theory was on the horizon decades ago, but pediatric sex-rejecting interventions did not reach the shores of the United States until about 2007. In 2007, endocrinologist Norman Spack, along with his protege, psychologist Laura Edwards-Leeper, opened GEMS at Boston Children's. It was the first pediatric mutilation clinic in the United States. I believe that Spack used Edwards-Leeper as a useful idiot to begin what will be seen as the world's actually, biggest medical scandal in human history. See, Edwards-Leeper had just gotten her degree and was easy to manipulate. This strategy of using newly graduated medical students was repeated by the American Academy of Pediatrics. The author of that policy was Jason Rafferty. He was still in his residency when he wrote it. The same thing happened with the American Psychiatric Association. It was Jack Turbin, who was in his residency, who spewed the lies about the efficacy of affirming a child's self-rejection. And Texas Medical Association did the same thing, but used medical students to create their transgender policies. Funny, it's well known that young minds, even those with degrees, are easy to manipulate. Spack, who was quoted as salivating at the thought of sex-rejecting interventions for children, and Leeper abandoned the established treatment of watchful waiting for children who were distressed about their sex, a cohort of children that had a desistance rate of 98%, if not affirmed. Instead, they adopted the terribly flawed Dutch treatment protocol that experimented on 70 children, 68 who were same-sex attracted, and 1 who died. Because the real goal of the Dutch was to permit trans-identified males to be able to trick the general public as to their sex. It wasn't about curing so-called gender dysphoria. But the real goal, we all know the real goal, was to become a creator. Have the doctors create. Leeper and Spack, without any scientific basis, altered the Dutch model, streamlining it so that the kids could move faster to medicalization. When asked why she did that, why she shortened the mental health assessment for children in contravention of the understudied Dutch model, she said it was because GEMS was short-staffed. There are now over 400 gender clinics and growing, even with the shutdowns at the major hospitals. Children and vulnerable adults' bodies are commodities and cash cows. Edwards-Leeper is one of the most dangerous psychologists in our country. In 2023, I attended a conference where Edwards-Leeper proudly recounted that Spack would tell people, everyone needs a Laura, because she claimed that her medical assessments could distinguish which child would benefit from sex trait modifications and which would not. So I asked her, did you follow up with any of those patients to confirm those superpowers? Her answer was no. But her clairvoyancy knows which kid is truly trans and which is not. That's what she continues to say to this day, that her assessment can figure out which child will benefit from being sterilized and having missing body parts and which will not. But notably, Edwards-Leeper rarely disapproves of any child getting sex-rejecting interventions. She wants the U.S. to reject the affirmative model and adopt her assessment model. But both models are absurd. No one has a misalignment of their brain and body. No one. Psychologist Amy Tishelman joined GEMS in 2013, and she testified last year that she had only just asked to create a database to track the outcome of the more than 1,000 children whose body that clinic had altered. Boston Children's have been experimenting on children's bodies for 18 years without any follow-up, while reducing their mental health assessments from 20 hours to 10 to now 2, before prescribing puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, or surgeries. Spack and Edwards wrote papers together, and their methodology exemplifies the incestuous nature of gender medicine and the falsification of medical papers that reached predetermined conclusions through data manipulation and circular referencing. They leveraged their prestige to convince other medical providers to adopt their unsubstantiated treatment protocols. In 2009, SPAC contributed to the Endocrine Society's guidelines, which declared that puberty blockers are fully reversible, which is false. Despite acknowledging that the evidence supporting the safety and efficacy of blockers was very low or low, the guidelines were actually then cited in the 2012 World Professional Association of Transgender Health Standards of Care as the basis for recommending blocking children's puberty. Coincidentally, SPAC also served on the executive committee for the WPATH SOC 7, so he was citing to himself. This is how it's done. WPATH is an advocacy group that named its policies standards of care. This is a legal term. It was used to fool other doctors and courts into believing that their monstrous recommendations are fully evidence-based and well-researched. But WPATH membership is filled with people who believe that they are the opposite sex. The authors of the standards of care are even tied to pedophilia, BDSM, and other extreme fetishes. They wrote the standards. In 2012, Edwards, Leeper, and SPAC published a paper for the AAP and again stated that puberty blockers are reversible. This time, they cited back to the WPATH. That, of course, they wrote. This circular citation strategy has created a false impression that independent groups supported these types of interventions. Another example of manipulation could be found in the $10 million NIH study led by Joanna Olson Kennedy. That study failed to show that children's mental health improved on blockers. Back in 2021, Olson Kennedy presented the one-year result of the study at USPATH conference, the US arm of WPATH. But at the 2-year mark, Olson Kennedy withheld the disappointing results. She finally published them in 2025. So why did she delay 3 years? Well, the New York Times reported that Olson Kennedy was afraid that her study would be weaponized by critics of transgender care for kids, and that the research would one day be used in courts to argue against the use of blockers. So she buried her data. She placed a political agenda above children's welfare. Since the NIH puberty blocker study did not reach the results that Olson Kennedy had hoped for, she attempted to temper the failure in the study's abstract. She concluded that the children's mental health would have likely worsened if their puberty hadn't been blocked. But her study had no control group, meaning that there's no possible way to substantiate this claim. She made this false conclusion so that she can continue sex-rejecting interventions on children. This is her abstract. I read her study results. Nowhere in her study results does it talk about if children had not been placed on puberty blockers. Most doctors just read this little abstract. Most people just read this little abstract. So the assumption there is that the children's mental health would have dropped if they weren't put on puberty blockers. And that's, of course, a lie. Olson Kennedy employed the same gamemanship for the hormone study results. Listen to what she did here. In the first 2 years, but she buried it. She hid it. Now remember, gender affirming care is supposed to stop suicide. Then why did these 2 children commit suicide under her watch? Under normal circumstances, 2 out of 315 deaths by suicide would have ended the study. But those deaths meant nothing to her, so she persevered. Olson Kennedy is captured on video stating that if girls miss their breasts after top surgery, they can just simply get new ones. She is proud that she has performed sex-rejecting procedures on children who are in foster care, homeless, prostituting, and drug-addled. She has said that it's no big deal if she transitioned kids who ultimately turn out not to be really trans because they have no fragility. They're privileged. She also has stated that it's not the worst thing to be trans, and after all, whose fault is it if she transitions a cis kid? Her answer is that it's the child patient's fault. She was merely providing what they asked for. Olson Kennedy opened the now closed largest pediatric gender clinic in the country, which was Children's Hospital LA. But the shuttering of that pediatric gender clinic has not stopped her. She recently opened a private clinic with her partner, Scott Moser, a prolific maimer of children. Undoubtedly, Olson Kennedy and her wife, a female therapist who claims to be a man, will continue to tag team and coerce parents to slowly poison their children, lest they commit suicide. This is a sickening tactic. 7 out of 7 doctors I took my daughter to told me that if I did not transition her, she would commit suicide. Olson Kennedy partnered with public and private schools through Gender Spectrum, a largely defunct advocacy group whose mission was, and I quote, to get gender ideology into every classroom. She, along with other clinicians, would use schools as pathways to create and find their victims. This is an example from my middle school. They were advertising Gender Spectrum with gender surgeons coming to the event. Scott Moser, I don't know if you can see his name up there, but he has been caught on video stating that he has no age limit for removing girls' breasts. I believe he's done over 2,000 elective double mastectomies. And he also contributed to the WPATH standards of care. Are you getting the connections? They're all connected. This is another slide from my school, and this is another Gender Spectrum conference, and they're inviting kids who are in pre-K. That's 4 years old. Those of you who have read the WPATH files, which you all should, may recognize Satterwhite. He is one of the surgeons who performs nullification surgeries. Think Wetsy Betsy doll or Ken doll crotch. He also performs surgeries that leaves a person's natural genitalia intact while adding fake opposite genitalia. Remember, folks, these surgeries are life-saving and medically necessary. At least that's what they tell us. These despicable, Mengelesque experimenters, because I'm sorry I can't call them doctors, invaded most of the medical societies. For almost 2 decades, these societies have lied to the doctors, the press, while assuring parents that sex-rejecting treatments are safe and effective for the fictional and socially concocted illness called gender dysphoria. There is no doubt in my mind that these societies know that they were peddling unnecessary treatments, and every last one of them needs to be held to account. Jason Rafferty's 2018 AAP transgender policy is riddled with errors and dramatic statements without any citations. Despite a very public analysis by James Cantor, the AAP did not waver from its position, but doubled and tripled down. It is my life's mission to take down the AAP. And I'm working on it. God bless the federal government. This is from Reuters. They tried to calculate how many kids were placed on puberty blockers. These numbers aren't even close. Not even close. They're not close because we now know, although we parents knew a long time ago, that they were manipulating ICD codes or medical codes to hide the number of kids that they were performing sex-rejecting interventions on. And these numbers don't include Kaiser Permanente, and Kaiser Permanente is the most prolific hospital setting for rearranging children's body parts. This is Jeremy Carswell. She's at Boston Children's too. And she has stated that they're handing out puberty blockers like candy, which in her mind is great in some ways. Great. She thinks it's great that children grow up with undeveloped brains and have their natural puberty arrested, which is not reversible. But remember, puberty blockers are profitable. The drug Lupron by AbbVie costs around $27,000 for a 6-month supply. A 6-month Suprelin implant made by Endo Pharmaceuticals costs $210,000. This is from UCSF's website. UCSF is a leader in altering children's sex traits. Its pediatric clinic was founded and is led by Madeline Deutsch, who also serves as the president of USPath. Again, see how these ghouls are all connected? It's amazing what a few horrible people can do. The infamous Diane Arensaf works at UCSF, and she teaches that 2-year-old boys who unbutton their onesie are communicating that they're actually girls. I can't make this up. She also says that little girls who rip their barrettes out or their ponytails out are communicating that they're really boys. She believes that there are an infinite number of gender identities, including a Prius and a Minotaur. So you can see up here, my eyes are old, so I can't really see what I'm pointing at, but it says that puberty blockers are completely reversible. That's UCSF's website. I screenshotted that June of this year. But let's look at their consent form, shall we? Okay, you can see there's my proof that it's their consent form. So here they say that children with trans identities need to have their puberty postponed. They say that the medicine is not permanent, lie, and that the blockers treat the trauma of unwanted puberty. So now natural puberty that we go through is traumatic. Here they talk about the long-term effects and the safety of puberty blockers that they say is not completely understood. Well, I thought it was reversible. Isn't that what you said on the website? No, you have to read the fine print. As they lure the kids in, then they change. They talk about the fact that blockers may affect fertility. Well, they do. And they also say that bone density will diminish, but is expected to return to normal. Lawyer brain here says expected, so you don't know, but you think so, maybe. We're talking about bones of a child. This example comes from Stephen Rosenthal, who partnered with none other than Joanna Olson Kennedy in that NIH study that I talked about. Rosenthal still hasn't released the results of what happens to the child's physical body when they're put on puberty blockers. And gee, I wonder why. I wonder if those results are negative. Oh, I don't know how to make this. Okay. So surgeon Marcy Bowers, the person pretending to be a woman over right above Duke, he is the current president of WPATH, upon which all medical societies base their transgender policies. And he justifies the identity of eunuch for children, because the word eunuch appears 47 times in the Bible. He has castrated over 2,000 males. And he admitted in this symposium that puberty blockers started at Tanner stage 2, which is around 9 and 10, plus estrogen, will result in a life without any sexual pleasure for males. How does one explain to a 9 or 10-year-old that he will never have sexual pleasure in a manner that he can understand? That's a rhetorical question because we know that you cannot. Incidentally, billionaire J.B. Pritzker, the governor of Illinois and a presidential hopeful, is a major contributor to Duke. Coincidence? I think not. Almost every major gender clinic advertised on its website that puberty blockers are reversible, well knowing that those statements are untrue or at best unknown. Some of them have scrubbed their websites since the executive orders and the FBI probes, but we parents, we took all those screenshots. We have them, secret. I want to spotlight a particularly dangerous gender clinic, and that is Seattle Children's Hospital. Not only does it state that gender interventions are life-saving and that puberty blockers are reversible, but it partners with its autism center. Youth with autistic traits are overly represented in the exploding cohort of kids and young adults adopting trans identities because they tend not to conform to rigid sex stereotypes, leaving them vulnerable to believing that there's something wrong with them. So combining the autism and pediatric gender centers provides a steady stream of patients for expensive and lifelong gender treatments. And Seattle Children's is hardly alone in this marketing scheme. The AAP also recommends asking any child with autism about their gender identity, feeding them that idea. Seattle's gender clinic also did something so devious, and the AAP published it. They wrote a perspective advancing the notion that refusing to modify a child's sex traits constitutes medical and emotional abuse. That's right. The largest pediatric medical society advances the notion that parents who refuse to have their daughter's breasts removed or sexual function destroyed are abusive. See why I want to go after the AAP? Seattle Children's also had the most prominent booth at the AAP's convention last year, where I was present with some detransitioners. I bought a booth. We set up our information. We made it 2 days before they kicked us out. They couldn't have the truth seep out to those pediatricians that were there.
I think when we're doing informed consent, I know that that's so big that we're just do it. We try to talk about it, but most of the kids are nowhere in any kind of a brain space to really talk about it in a serious way. That doesn't bother me, but we still want the kids to be happier in the moment, right?
Yeah, so this is a doctor saying that we understand that kids can't consent. It's always bothered me.
Oh, we just have 5 minutes.
Okay. It always bothered me, but we're going to do it anyway because we want to make them happier in the moment. This is from a clinic in DC. They help children 10 plus and excuse me, we're in a church, and I apologize for the language that is on this screen, but this medical clinic says that females can grow a male phallus from testosterone. Likewise, the online seller of hormones called Folks also lies and says you can change a woman's body to look like a man's body. That's untrue. This is Sive Gallagher. She is a plastic surgeon in Florida. She targets youth, the overweight, and the vulnerable. She advertises on TikTok, YouTube, and uses childlike antics to sell her services while posting pictures of her lavish lifestyle that her young victims' bodies provide. Here she's celebrating her success in a possible fraudulent insurance claim. This is some of her victims. As you can see, this young woman over here, she has cuts all over her stomach, cuts all over her arms and shoulders, and this doctor did the last cut and cut off her healthy breasts. The cross-sex hormone industry is extremely lucrative. In 2022, it's a $1.6 billion industry, and it's expected to grow to 2.6. Planned Parenthood, Folks, and Plume are the biggest profiteers. This is from Plume, an online seller of cross-sex hormones. It says, stuff that we think you might like. What that says there is, if you are underage and you run away to New York, you can get cross-sex hormones without your parental consent. They are inviting kids to run to New York. What happens to them when they go to New York? This is from Folks. This guy, I went to this. This guy was speaking in front of at-risk youth. They were ages 10 to 12. It was at the Zuckerberg Center. Kai, male, was dressed like a hooker, talking to young kids about cross-sex hormones and transgender surgeries. I'm going to get really gross here. I'm really sorry. The online seller of cross-sex hormones is now advertising a chemical concoction to make some kind of ooze come out of males' chests so that they can feed infants. I really wish I was making this up. I really wish I didn't have to stand here and say this stuff. Oh. And here's the final, the crescendo, which should scare us to death, because it scared me to death. This is, again, Plume talking about things we think you'd like to know, and that is that 90% of men who think that they are women would be thrilled to have a uterus transplant. With that uplifting thought, I will end and once again implore you to get involved however you can, because as I just showed you, humanity is truly at stake. This isn't a drill. And you, all of you, are the White Knights. Thank you.
I'm very proud to introduce our final speaker of the night. It's a man who truly doesn't need an introduction. When you write half a dozen books explaining critical theory and what's going on with America, you don't need an introduction. In fact, when every single person doing any kind of significant work in this space or in the diversity, equity, inclusion space, when every single person owes either a significant or complete debt of thanks to this man for explaining to them what the problem was and why, before the rest of us knew what was going on. This man does not need an introduction because you've already met him. If you've met Erin Lee, if you've met me, if you've met countless other people, we have Dr. James Lindsay to thank. And so with that, I don't want to introduce this man. I want to first say one more thing I wanted to say. If you leave here tonight and you have more questions, more things you want to learn, I really highly recommend checking out newdiscourses.com. Newdiscourses.com. You can see some of his books. There's free videos. If you're new to this, the bullets are probably up your alley. They're short. I see a lot of people smiling and nodding. So I really highly recommend New Discourses. You should check that out and get some more James Lindsay if you need that. But so with that, I don't want to introduce Dr. James Lindsay. I'd like to give him a warm thank you and a welcome from Colorado, Dr. James Lindsay.
This is great. Normally I have to scare people, but Erin just scared the crap out of everyone, so I don't have to do it. That was horrifying. Thank you all for coming out tonight. I want to actually start with an analogy or a kind of a metaphor. I want you to imagine that there's this great big steel door next to me, right? And I have, I don't know, maybe a testosterone-induced fit of rage or whatever, and decide to punch the door. Now, I'm pretty buff. So what's going to happen? Is the door going to break, or am I going to break my hand? Right, okay. This isn't hard. I think everybody in the room guessed correctly. I'm not going to break the door. I'm going to break my hand. Now, what if I really went back in the back and sat and thought about it and really worked myself up into believing that I'm strong enough to punch through the door? And I pull my arm back and I hit the door. Am I going to break the door, or am I going to break my hand? I'm going to break my hand. Not that hard. What if I went back in the back and watched 10 Marvel movies? Got myself totally convinced that, maybe I did get bit by a radioactive spider when I was a kid. Whatever. And I come out and I punch the door. Am I going to break the door, or am I going to break my hand? It's not complicated. I'm going to break my hand, right? Everybody understands this because everybody understands that true is true for everybody. It doesn't matter what you believe. It doesn't matter what you watched on TV or seen on the internet. It doesn't matter what you fantasize. True is simply true, and steel is stronger than bone. It's that simple. And I bring that up because we're now in a position where people have convinced themselves sitting in rooms that true things don't apply to them because they believe them hard enough, and true things can't even be brought in front of them if they can convince everybody else to play along with them. Because this is actually how this cult, and that's the right word, both Erins, that's actually the right word. That's how this cult works. I'm supposed to explain to you, how did we get here? How did we get to where the presentation, I was sitting there the whole time Erin Friday was talking and thinking, it's so preposterous that we're talking about this stuff. It's so preposterous that I have friends who went to not just college, but to graduate school in biology, who come up and give similar speeches about men and women being different. Let me assure you, every single person on the planet, no matter how smart or dumb their parents were, had two parents who figured it out. Every single raccoon had two parents that figured it out. We can go as far into this as you want. This isn't a complicated fact about reality. Men and women are different, and this is not a transmutable thing. Trans is not real, and that doesn't invalidate anyone's existence. It actually affirms their existence as they are in their true essence. And we have been led to a place where we have to do this backwards, where not only are the biologists making speeches about this, but they're having to consult with state legislatures so that states, not probably this one, can pass statutes defining sex in an ironclad way that no little linguistic manipulator can get around, so that we can use words like male and female or men and women in law, and there's something to point to in law that clarifies it. That's how far off we've gone. And the reason is because we have adopted very widely in our society many of our medical professionals have adopted, many of our medical societies endorse, almost all of our universities, except maybe Hillsdale, endorse a critical constructivist ideology of sex, gender, and sexuality, which is generally called queer theory, or gender ideology, if you like the more colloquial term. And we have hit this point somehow or another, and I'm going to try to explain a little bit of how we got here. But I want to explain this fancy terminology. I'm not going to use it over and over again. Critical constructivist ideology of sex, gender, and sexuality. What is critical constructivism? It has two words in it, critical and constructivist. I'm not going to bog you down with all this academic. I just need you to understand constructivist in particular means that we believe, which none of us in here believe, by the way, that we construct reality through our perceptions and beliefs. Reality is not out there for us to encounter and discover. It's in here for us to construct with our minds. And what is true is a matter of consensus, what everybody around us believes. So if I work myself up hard enough and believe it deeply enough, the reality is that steel door will give way when I punch it. And then when it doesn't, what I have to point at is you. Because you didn't believe it with me. And if everybody believed it with me, then it's real because nobody would deny it. So when the fantasy doesn't work, it's not the person's fault who engaged in the fantasy or indulged the fantasy, as these physicians are doing. It's the fault of the society at large for not going along with the program. That is what constructivism refers to. It literally is the belief that human beings construct reality itself in our minds. And the reason there's a coherent reality that we share is because we are all led by social processes to believe the same things, which might be correct or incorrect. And when we don't believe that gender transition is real, we have been led through oppressive power and damaging, harmful stereotypes or whatever to believe the wrong thing. And that can be corrected. That's what it believes. That's the constructivist half. The critical half refers to critical theory, which Travis just mentioned. Critical theory is a school of Marxist thought. The actual definition of critical in critical theory, or critical theory if you want, comes from a guy named Max Horkheimer, who was a member of what's called the Frankfurt School, which was an institution established in Germany before World War II to advance Marxism in Western nations. When Hitler took power in 1933, the school, with some help from other socialists, fled to America and set up in our elite universities, Columbia in particular, Brandeis, eventually several in the UC, the University of California, sorry, I'm in another C state here, University of California system, and we ended up with these lunatic Marxists getting deeply, not just inside of our universities and our academic apparatuses, but also inside of our government. So Max Horkheimer was the director of this institution for many years, and he said in an interview, reflecting back in 1960, he defines it in 1937, he reflects in 1969, looking back at this trip of critical theory, which defines a school of thought called critical Marxism. He says, well, we invented the critical theory because what we realized is that it is not possible to describe an ideal or even a good world on the terms of the existing world. But what we can do is criticize those parts of the existing world that we wish to change. You don't have to know what utopia looks like, you just have to know that it's not transphobic. And so then you find the transphobia and call it out. Whether it's a medical society, whether it's ideas of childhood innocence that you wouldn't subject a 4-year-old to this, whether it's actual endocrinology, whether it's actual facts about how puberty blockers, as they're called, work, and they are used for actual disorders like precocious puberty that are not the same thing as somebody electively deciding they're going to traumatically experience their puberty and want to avoid it, or might want to maintain their pre-secondary sex levels of development so that super physiological doses of cross-sex hormones won't fry their bodies. Whatever it happens to be, the idea is that we can criticize that out in the world that we think needs to be changed. For what? for liberation. Liberation from what? Oppressive structures, including reality itself. So if you guys are all out here telling me and believing me, like you did, that I can't punch through the steel door, you're oppressing me in my belief to develop the capacity to punch through a steel door. And if I can't do it this way, maybe we need to find a surgery that will enhance my arm or body, transform me into something that I'm currently not, and allow me to do it. And it was your fault that I broke my hand, and I'm going to hold you all responsible. This is literally the mentality of the critical theory mixed with the constructivism. And critical constructivist ideology of sex, gender, and sexuality is what we call queer theory or gender ideology. I'll just be clear, queer theory is their word for their discipline. Gender ideology is our word to describe what they've been peddling. They don't use that term. They tend not to recognize that term, but it's a very good term because it's an ideology about this concept called gender. But before we come back to gender, I want to go back in time to these critical Marxists and what was going on, because ultimately this is a Marxist attack on our society, just not in the classical form. We don't have Bolsheviks, except for the DSA that's taking over all our politics. We don't have Bolsheviks knocking down our doors and stealing our farms and promising bread, land, and peace, except that's almost exactly what they're promising. I think it's houses, bread, and peace instead. We don't have a full Bolshevik revolution on our hands like they had in Soviet Union in the early 1920s and the late 19-teens. What we have instead is a different attack of Marxist ideology, and Marxist ideology transformed. So part of how we got here was Marxism didn't work. Marxism wasn't taken up by Western countries, and so they had to figure out a way to make Marxism palatable to a Western, free enterprise-loving, freedom-loving, liberty-loving people. And the way they got in was through identity politics. So what happened, the same Max Horkheimer I just described in the same interview actually said, what we realized in forming the School of Critical Theory was that Marx had gotten something wrong. They were all Marxist. In fact, the first name for the institute, the Frankfurt School, was formerly called the Institute for Social Research. You notice, just like all these other things, it doesn't actually tell you anything about what it does. It does social research. Its original name was the Institute for Marxism. And it was considered a little too on the nose. It gave a little too much of the game away, so they changed the name to the Institute for Social Research. What they were responding to, says its early director, Max Horkheimer, in this interview in 1969, is that Marx had gotten wrong. He said that Marx believed that capitalism, which is more rightly called free enterprise, would immiserate the worker. It would make you miserable to have to go to work every day, to be exploited by your boss, etc. And he says, but in fact, what we learned is it allows the worker to build a better life. That's why they had to develop the critical theory. Because people like Americans and Western Europeans who lived in relatively free, or in America, very free economic conditions and social conditions, wouldn't swallow Marxist garbage. We had the American dream. We had upward mobility. We knew if we worked hard and tried to make a better life and got educated and put our shoulder to the wall and pushed, that we could actually elevate ourselves out of bad conditions through work. And that opportunity in work might not come to us as entrepreneurs, or maybe not immediately, but that we could work for somebody else to get a foundation, to get skills, and to build literally a better life. And these communists hated it. They resented it. And they said the problem is that the West has a culture of capitalism, and attacking economics won't work because they're building better lives. So we attack them on cultural lines. We attack them on the culture of liberty and freedom and economic success and growth. And the entire point of the Institute for Social Research that developed the critical theory, that employed the critical theory, which is the same critical theory with an extra word in it that we call critical race theory today, that school existed to criticize the American and Western way of life so that people would be willing to abandon it in the name of liberation from work into socialism. This was the entire endeavor. It didn't get very far either. They had something like a mini revolution in the late 1960s. It didn't get very far. kind of the intellectual godfather of that's a man named Herbert Marcuse, who was also a member of the Frankfurt School, who worked with Max Horkheimer, and he angrily in 1972 said, we have to do something different. We cannot go the way that we've been going. We have to go into the professions. We have to take what you've probably heard called the long march through the institutions. So we're going to go into, he said, education at all levels. We're going to go into computer programming. Even in 1972, he mentioned computer programming. Or Western Marxism, Antonio Gramsci called boring from within. So rather than having a bloody revolution from without, rather than agitating workers to revolt, as happened in the communist countries in the East, we're going to do something functionally different in the West. We're going to bore inside and change minds. And the key was, for him, education at all levels. And the reason that education at all levels was so important is because the entire professional apparatus of society depends on educated people getting jobs. If you want to break it down in very simple terms, white-collar jobs have college degrees, which is what we all ended up selling our kids in the 1980s and the 1990s, which is why we had this crisis where we sent way more kids to college than should have, and the colleges, the government, I should say, responded by opening up the floodgates of student loan money. The colleges responded by building every student service, not academic stuff, every student service, bowling alleys, movies, weightlifting facilities, cool dorms that are like really high tech instead of the really junky one where we had 85 people to 4 shower heads with no curtains. When I went to college, old school, 4 bathroom stalls, 80 people. It was so fun waiting in line with your towel around your waist, waiting to be able to go step in the naked room and take a shower every morning so you could go to school and not smell. And this is what you did. Nope, we're going to have suites in every dorm now. The universities built crazy high-tech facilities for like some kind of advanced learning, like blackboards weren't good enough. As a mathematician, we were extremely incensed about the transition from chalk and blackboard, chalk and slate, to whiteboard and marker that doesn't work and smells funny. But the transitions happened, and the universities got hundreds of millions of dollars in debt with mortgages. But who cares, because the federal government's now underwriting every single student loan that the students can't default on, and now we have that financial crisis, which has generated the exact kind of conditions that Marxists need to have a revolution. Isn't that interesting how that worked out? Yeah, well, this was Bill Clinton, actually, that signed that. But yeah, Obama screwed up a lot of stuff too. Well, when they went into the education system at all levels, they didn't just try to infect computer programmers. They went in looking for the cultural issues that would incense Americans, that would agitate Americans, full well knowing that it wouldn't be economic issues because we're allowed to build a better life. We have the American dream. I wear it inside my jacket. That's my Pete Hegseth moment. Okay? He's always wearing 7 American flags. I don't know how many I got, but it's more than 7. So they went in, and what Marcuse realized was, he said, the proletariat isn't going to work. The working class isn't going to work. He actually said in an essay he wrote in the 1960s, we need a new working class. And he says we're going to find it, and I quote, in the ghetto populations. We're going to find it in the racial minorities, the sexual minorities, the feminists. Man, we can lay some blame on the feminists for all this stuff. All of the outsiders, the mentally ill, the prisons. The prisoners, actually, the whole prison industrial complex, so to speak. And he raised up a generation of identity politicians who were using a cultural Marxist framework for their ideas. And so what you had is this set of people who would go out and say, it's not the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, or the capitalist versus the worker, it's actually whites versus people of color. It's not the bourgeoisie versus the proletariat, it's normal people versus the outsiders, which have been called queer. And so you see critical race theory emerging from the 1970s, named in the 1980s, taking off in the 1990s, and entering into education immediately at all levels, down to preschool. You see queer theory emerging from sex positive radical feminism from the 1970s in the same milieu into the 1980s, where they had the sex wars and defeated the prudes who thought all sex was some kind of patriarchal oppression of women, and then into the 1990s when it becomes named. It gets its name in 1991. It gets defined in 1995. How is queer in this queer theory that's relevant to trans defined? In 1995 by David Halperin on page 62 of the book called Saint Foucault. I've had to cite it a few times. It is defined as whatever is opposed to the normal, the legitimate, and the dominant. In the definition of queer that David Halperin gives, the first three words are unlike gay identity, which he then describes as having what he says as a positive essential object choice, which is some fancy academic language that means we don't know what causes people to be gay, but it's real. It's actually something about people. He says, unlike that, queer is a political position opposed to normalcy and legitimacy. He goes on to say that the person who qualifies as queer is anyone who is or feels marginalized as a result of his or her sexual practices. And then the next sentence, actually it's still the same sentence with like a semicolon, he goes on to drop an oblique reference to pedophilia. He says that you don't have to be a gay or a lesbian to be queer. You could be a normal heterosexual married couple with or without children, maybe very naughty children. Why does he have to drop it there? Because they can't get away from it. It's at the center of all of this queer theory stuff. But this was the new axis. This was the new plan. This is what Cruz was all about, with boring into the institutions and bringing the identity politics to the forefront. The same Marxist agitation, the same cult mentality, the same conflict theory of history, the same cult religion, the same Gnostic cult religion that feels that you are imprisoned by the reality that won't let you punch through a steel door unless everybody else believes it. This same thing shatters out into personal identity. It's equipped by people in the education field like Paulo Freire working in Brazil, becomes equipped to be where everybody can create their own Marxist theory of their own circumstances. So what you ended up with was Marxism no longer controlled by the Communist Internationale, maybe in Soviet Russia, now is in the hands of every student that walks through a class and is exposed to critical pedagogy in this way of thinking. The vehicle by which it was brought to all of us. So how did we get here? One key word that ruined us all, because we're good people and we care: inclusion. Inclusion. We were asked to include this. We were asked to include this even when it was very clear, say by 2020, 2021, it was very clear that inclusion actually meant exclusion of everything that disagrees with them. Well, it turns out that these people are just copy artists. They're not creative people. The inclusion push, which we all see, is very clear that it doesn't mean including everybody. Certainly, you white Christian men are not going to be included in the inclusion, because you're going to cause somebody to feel uncomfortable, and that means that you're reaffirming their oppression, so you have to leave so that they can feel included. So you're excluded, so they're included. I hope you understand. Unless what? You change your mind and affirm everything they say, including their critical theory views about sex, gender, and sexuality and reality and every other thing. This model was stolen by these people, and you'll be shocked, I know, shocked to hear who they stole it from. The Soviets. This was a Soviet Union program in the 1920s. The Russian name for it was Korenizatsia. It was a key item, the second most important priority, according to Lenin and Stalin, who at the early 1920s were still working together because Lenin hadn't died yet, for the integration into the Soviet Union politics in order to be able to advance their most radical agendas. And the way that it's supposed to work is that there's all, for them in the Soviet Union, you had Russia, which is the big one, and then you had Ukraine, which is like the next big one, and then Georgia, which is small, Estonia, which is smaller, Latvia, the Caucasus, these kind of ambiguous regions that are things like Kazakhstan and such on the like kind of the southern rim. You had all of these regions that were going to get brought into the Soviet Union as Soviet states. And what the Koreanizatsiya program actually defined was the idea that we're going to go around and have diverse representation of people who are allowed to self-determine under their own cultural values that will not be exposed or criticized by the great Russian and his great Russian chauvinism. You've probably heard white supremacy culture. You've probably heard heteronormativity, cisnormativity. That's great Russian chauvinism repackaged for identity politics following critical race theory and queer theory. Same exact thing. So we're going to have these representatives. And what you were actually going to install in the Russian was raznoobrazia, which means diversity. And diversity for Lenin was defined explicitly as diversity in form with unity in content. That is, everybody looks different, but they think the same. Does that make diversity and inclusion suddenly make sense? Guess what? 1921 Soviet Union policy. 4 years into the Union. This was straight communist activity to be able to advance their most radical agendas by getting a Georgian, or like Stalin, or a Ukrainian, or something to advance it, and when somebody else criticized, they could call him a racist, a great Russian chauvinist, and they could advance their program. Does that sound like the Colorado State House? You transphobes? It's the same program. How did we get here? Communists figured out a way to sneak communist theory and practice into our society under new language, in new forms, identity politics appealing to our tolerance, appealing to our good nature, appealing to our trust, appealing to the fact that we actually rejected, it took us a while, but we rejected bigotry, appealing to many of the best things about our culture, our society, our morals, our values, our theology, and they tricked us. And they brought in a Sovietized version with new names and never told us that's what it was. I don't even know that most of them even knew that that's what it was. And it works the same no matter who uses it. It tears the United States apart the same way that Koreanizatsiya tore the Soviet Union apart. Koreanizatsiya was canceled by the end of the 1920s because it made everybody so racially and ethnically divisive. They couldn't get anything done, so Stalin introduced a great Russification program. Everybody's Russian now. Don't care where you're from. Great Russian chauvinism's back, and it's back with a vengeance. They had to get rid of it. It doesn't work. All it works to do is create division and tear a society apart. And the reason we got here is because they tricked us to believe that this notion of inclusion, which is a vehicle for communist ideology and communist practice and communist mechanisms with communist consequences, was something good, that it appeals to our values, the rejection of bigotry, that all men are created equal, that we're endowed with inalienable rights by our Creator, and that we're not going to judge people by the color of their skin, but the content of their character. And I'll add the quality of their merits. They should do some good work if they're hungry. That's biblical, guys. They tricked us. That's how we got here. We got tricked by communists. So how do we get out of it? We have to get untricked by communists. That starts by being clear on what we're actually looking at. That starts with us explaining that this is, in fact, a tool that will be used in any society under any form that it takes, specifically to split the population, to tear it apart, and to advantage radical activists into positions of power that they will then abuse. Whether they're medical professionals, whether they're activists posing as the heads of medical societies, whether they are state politicians like Scott Wiener, whether, it's fun to say that name, you're right, Erin, or whatever else. They're going to get into these positions, bore from within, bring their ideology with them, which is communism, and abuse it. We start with clarity. There's an old Polish proverb, which is never attempt to cure what you don't understand. If we fail to understand this, we'll flip out. We'll say it's just a bunch of gay people. Then we'll get angry at gay people. Or we'll say it's just a bunch of anti-white bigotry. And we'll try to reverse it the other way and reignite the racial tensions of the 1940s and 1950s. We can be tricked into that phase of the revolution too. But if we get clarity, we realize actually what the bad actions are, and we learn to be able to tell who the bad actors are. So Erin played a clip of a very boring looking but horrifying board meeting of some kind. And this guy says something that everybody was shocked about, that the scientists know better than the parents and the politicians know better than the parents because they're experts. You don't have a master's degree and your kid, but they apparently do, whatever. And that actually was not the part of that clip that caught my attention as somebody who studied this over and over and over again deeply for years. It was the fact that 3 or 4 times in this like 30 seconds you played, the guy said, for all kids, for all kids, for all kids. It doesn't, for all kids. What's wrong with education for all kids, for opportunity for all kids? In communist land, just like diversity means diversity in form with unity in content, for all means the assumption is that some can't access it because there are systems of power that have to be torn down first. So when you hear for all, for all, for all, for all, what they mean is a redistribution on their bogus assumptions that some are getting less. They're justifying it every single time. This is what I mean by gaining clarity. When we gain clarity, we can see how the words actually transmit the ideas and get put into action. And when we have that, we can figure out, even with the craftiest of actors, who is pushing this kind of un-American, divisive, evil ideology. We don't even have to get into the really obvious stuff. We can actually learn to perceive it, to discern it, and to identify who those actors are and to deal with them, even when they're subtle, even when they're not horrifying. We can understand what their motivations are, how they think. But then what we can also do is use the only antidote. Their idea, actually the logic. In other words, they think truth is not just the product of their imagination, but of an imagination that they force us all to share. There's a simple antidote to that. It's called the actual truth, because of what I said at the beginning. True is true for everybody. Truth cuts down error. It doesn't matter how many degrees they have. It doesn't matter how many accolades they have. Let me just give you one example of how simple this is to understand how powerful true is. Let's pretend that these chairs are filled with some eminent scientists, politicians, the most famous people you can think of, the most important people. Donald Trump can be one, the Pope can be one, whoever you like. I know it's probably not a Catholic church, but the Pope can be here for my example. We need big names, big famous people with a lot on the line. And I say, okay, guys, how wide is this room? How wide is this room? And the first guy, whoever it is, says, it's Donald Trump. So he says, the room is tremendous, best room I've ever seen, 47 feet, 47. And then whoever else, they all make their guesses. 47 feet, 52 feet, 61 feet, 192 feet, because maybe Scott Wiener's on the last one, right? And he's measuring the way he measures. Okay? And then they start arguing with each other. Oh, it's this. No, it's that. Oh, it's this. It's that. And maybe one of them's really good. It's probably Donald Trump. And he convinces you all that it's 47 feet. And then the security guy comes in the back and is like, guys, I got a tape measure. How do you think these 4 very proud men suddenly feel when a tape measure shows up? A little nervous. That's right, yeah. A little nervous, a little uncomfortable. The more pride they put on the line, the more nervous they are. Why? Because once we stretch that tape measure from that wall to that wall, we're going to see a number. That number is going to be true. The number is going to be correct. Every one of their arguments, all their charisma, all their appeal, the fact that they're the Pope or the President is out the window. And the harder they argued, the more crazy they got, the stupider they look. And the problem is, if they convince you, you have it too. The truth is true for everyone. The truth can cut down any error. The truth doesn't care who is wrong. It will humble the most proud. And the best part is, the truth is actually accessible to anyone, such as our Erins over here and our Dr. Travis over here, who will do the work to find the truth and bring it to light. and to share it and then repeat it and love it and fight for it and defend it and correct others when they're in error too. And it can spread, and then we can actually have the only kind of unity that's true unity, which is we are in unity because we agree on things because we see that they are true, and we know that they are true because each of us could independently verify it for ourselves. So we don't have to rely on charisma or character or anything else to fill in the gap. That is actually the solution. The solution is that we look for the truth. You're all doing that. You're all here tonight. You're all engaged. We share the truth. We advocate for the truth. What consequences does that have in practical reality? Well, number one, people who believe the truth about what's happening about these issues will sign these petitions that this organization is putting forward in order to save the children of the state of Colorado. Will it win at the ballot box after you step up and help and get enough signatures to get it there? Who knows? But it sends a statement of truth, and it sends a statement also when the Democrats or whoever spend tens of millions of dollars to defeat these very simple, very popular ideas, that they are very invested in making sure that the truth loses, that they're very invested in hiding the truth, that they're very invested in continuing their agenda. And also, that's tens of millions of dollars they're not spending to get a Democrat elected governor. And so I join in with everyone else and implore you to get active, get involved to the degree that you can help. If it's one person, if it's 20, if it's 200, if it's 2,000, to get signatures on pieces of paper, to put these 3 propositions on the ballot for the people of Colorado to decide in the election next year. You have this opportunity. You have this power in your hands because the only true power is the truth, and the truth is accessible to everyone. And of course, the good book says the truth will set us free. Thank you.
Wow, we have Dr. James Lindsay in Fort Collins, Colorado. I actually want to ask all of our speakers to come on up. We promised a Q&A opportunity with these brilliant minds, so we only have about 10 minutes. We're going to discharge Kirk style. I know Charlie was one of James' best friends. So if we can form a line right here for anyone who has questions for the panel, make it as quick as possible, please, because we only have about 10 minutes. Should have 2 microphones there. Great. Okay. Come on up. Yep, you're first.
Yes, I would like the gentleman who speaks so well. Thank you for showing knowledge about the Frankfurt School and so on. But I wonder if you would identify for all these good people, what group of people is responsible for all these bad things happening, for all these bad things that happen in the USA. Would you identify that group of people?
The group of people for whom are responsible for what's happening in the USA right now are communists. They are religious communists who believe their religion of communism, but they're also partnered with very large moneyed interests in other countries that want to see the United States torn apart and who have pushed these agendas along with other agendas into our country very vigorously. That includes a gigantic nonprofit complex that's located all throughout the world, including everybody knows about George Soros, of course, but lots of other advisors like Arabella advisors and so on. It includes Russia, who wants to see our country torn to pieces. It involves China, who has every ambition to take over hegemony of the world in the 21st century and has a strong United States to deal with. It has to do with, as I keep hearing everywhere now, the Islamic states, Qatar particularly, for whatever reason, are funding an awful lot of this kind of stuff. It turns out that the vast majority of the woke books that were published in the 1970s and 1980s in the United States were published at university presses that were very close to large Islamic centers that were funneling money to them, because there are many enemies of the United States and enemies of freedom who would wish to tear our country apart in virtually every way. But I don't want you to get out and start thinking too much about the money. I want you to understand the devotion of communists. Their religious fervor is unstoppable to transform the world, because their religious belief is that the world is an oppressive prison that we can only escape through adopting a communistic framework everywhere with everyone. And as I said in my remarks, that it will only work when everybody truly and fully believes it, at which point we can enter into a classless, stateless society in which it is from each according to their abilities and to each according to their needs, and there will be plenty for everyone. And they do not rest, they do not stop, they have absolutely no compunctions on telling dishonesty or telling lies to advance their agenda. And they are going to be relentless until they are fully exposed and are boxed out of our institutions and our country, just like every other country they've tried to ruin. I'm sorry?
I would like you to identify the people behind the scenes who finance all this, who were the boss of Karl Marx, who hired him. Who were those people? Stalin, Lenin, Karl Marx, and so many others.
I mean, there are many theories about who financed all of these different people at different times.
To expose the name of those people. Who call themselves Jews.
We only have about 5 minutes. So we're going
Oh, I
on to
know.
the next question. Thank you so much. All right, everyone, thank you so much. Paul is one of, next question is one of the brave parents in Colorado who has lost access to his own daughter from unwillingness to call her the opposite sex. Thank you, Paul, for being here.
Hi, thank you all for being here. Antoinette, courage is courageous, and you're going to inspire a lot of young people to reject this pernicious ideology. So keep being brave. I'm proud of you, and thank you. And Antoinette is a beautiful name. That's awesome. I want to summarize this as short as possible because I know there are other people, but I realize the truth is like an antiseptic. When you shine the truth on things, a lot of people who are honest will accept it. But we're dealing with people who are especially recalcitrant and resistant to the truth. They're demoralized, and it doesn't matter with some of these people how much evidence you have or objective truth you put in front of them, they will just resist it and hate it no matter what. So how do you aspire to change the minds of people who are ostensibly totally crazy and wacky jerks?
My really short answer to that is that I do not. And I understand that that's a very personal challenge for you in your life. I do not try to change the minds of the people who are deep into cult ideology. Instead, I try to change the minds of the people who are on its edges. Like if you think of the cult kind of, or there's these recalcitrant, completely brainwashed people in the center of kind of like an onion. There's a layer on the outside, and outside of that. And I try to bring those people into realizing that the thing at the middle is a dangerous pit, and to try to keep as many of them out as possible. And then what you have to actually do, or we all actually have to do, is to take the responsibility of making sure that good men and good women stand as watchers, whether it's over our own children or whether it's over our state institutions or our medical institutions. We get more involved to box them out of power because they are recalcitrant. They are completely religiously committed to the transformation of the world through their crackpot ideas, and they're therefore dangerous and have to just be kept away from the levers of power. But it's virtually impossible. But we are in a church, so you're not allowed to ever give up on anybody, and the answers are to love at a safe distance, pray for your enemies, and always welcome them with as a landing pad. If you start to have doubts or questions, I want to be a resource for you to have somebody to talk to. I don't hate you. I hope that you stop with these beliefs, and you always have somebody that you can come talk to if you want to find a way out of evil. But you also don't have to lay down on the floor and let them walk over you or control you or take control over things that control your life while they are not willing to do that. So this is the general advice that I give. But what we're looking at, frankly, is a cult deprogramming at a societal scale, and nobody's ever had to do that before.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, this is just a quick comment and a question. I'm probably one of the few liberal-esque people in this audience, and politically homeless at this point, because this one topic has totally drawn me through the looking glass, and just to see how many people on my side are brainwashed. And I love my conservative brethren, and I definitely want to pursue this deeper. So my family kind of approaches things more of a scientific angle, and I'm just wondering if any of you have book recommendations, kind of entry level to moderate, in terms of like how we can, from a scientific and truth way, like, you know, tell people what this is all about, you know, to educate ourselves.
All right, so I was a Democrat for 40 years, so I see you. When Charlie passed is when I switched over. But there's a great book written by a liberal like you who sees this as a horrible thing, and it's called Sacrificial Lamb. And it is really well researched and really easy to read, and it just came out. It's a great read. I would start there because you're going to see yourself in that book, because you have to dip your toe in first before you dive in.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you. That's a great question.
Good evening, all of you. Thanks for being here. Dr. Lindsay, my question is for you, sir. Can you comment about political Islam and what appears to be an interplay between political Islam and communism, as if each is piggybacking off the other at different times?
Yeah, I actually kind of touched that a minute ago. The fact is that both are actually enemies of the West. They're enemies of freedom. They're enemies of America, and they realize that their own ambitions in the world are impossible without getting America and Western free countries off of the table. So they're targeting them, and they're willing to work together. Of course, you can look in Iran in the revolution in 1979 to see that this team up has happened in the past, and you can ask yourself how many real communists are in Iran today to guess, you know, how that works out. Zero. Most of them were told to convert or die as soon as the revolution ended. But you can also look to China and how they treat their Muslim Uyghurs to see what happens if the communists have the upper hand with force and politics. But that's the first level of the answer, is that they have a shared interest in destroying that which they consider to be the worst part of the world. For the communists, they believe that we are all under false consciousness, that our freedom engenders the ability to oppress people, and therefore we have to be taken care of or re-educated or destroyed in order that we would not continue to do that. And the Muslims call this jahiliyyah, which means age or land of ignorance. Right? And so the perpetuation of the ignorance of Islam and of Sharia is actually the cause of all the problems in the world, and therefore that they are fully justified in treating us as ignorant as if we were animals, and that therefore they can lie to us or deceive us or take over. But the idea is that we can't have true peace in the world. You've probably heard the saying, Islam is a religion of peace. We can't have true peace in the world until everybody submits to Allah and to Sharia, and therefore they're fully justified in trying to destroy the land of ignorance, the jahiliyyah, in the world. So that's their angle, which is the same angle as it turns out. And these two, actually, there's a deeper fusion to their ideology. I just read the book Milestones by Sayyid Qutb, who is the intellectual godfather of the Muslim Brotherhood, and he was the inspiration for the Taliban and Osama bin Laden. And it turns out Sayyid Qutb spent much of his youth as a communist. And he figured out how to adapt Lenin's What Is to Be Done that he used as a roadmap to take over the Soviet Union, or Russia, to become the Soviet Union. He adapted this to the idea of a radical political Islam that was rising very rapidly in Egypt at the time when he was a young man. And he comes up with this political theory we now call political Islam or Islamism. There are debates in broader Islam as to whether or not that's an accurate portrayal of what's in the Quran, but it is a Leninist interpretation visibly and obviously. So you have also an ideological undercurrent where the two things actually line up in their fundamental thinking, political Islam or Islamism alongside communism, because they're operating in the same way. They have the same picture of the world. Everybody has false consciousness, but the world will be peaceful and plentiful once we get rid of the false consciousness. The stupid infidels have it, so let's destroy them and take over for everybody's own good, because they believe each in their own way that they have the unique true theory of humanity. Socialist on the one hand, where everybody shares and submitted to Sharia and to Allah on the other hand, which is its own, I was going to say religion, but I hesitate.
Did you know Qutb lived in Greeley?
Say it again, what?
He lived 10 minutes away.
He lives here?
No, he
lived. No, he died in 66, right. So, yeah, I knew he came here to study, but I didn't know it was here.
Greeley, Colorado. It's like 10 minutes. Yeah. All right.
Oof, Colorado.
My question is, seeing what's going on in California, what's going on here now, Colorado is trying to outrace California to communism. What is the message of hope that you guys can give Colorado so that way we don't just live in despair and spiral as the left starts to creep in deeper and deeper and deeper?
The Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is our friend, and we have gotten a lot of wins this year, and there are more to come. So everybody knows the Skermetti case. Now that helped 27 states that had bans on gender interventions, but it opened up people's eyes, and actually the New York Times had a report on this stuff. So that's really important, is to get the press to have to report on this. You have your Colorado case, Childs versus Salazar. We're going to win that 100%. We're going to win that. We had the Mahmoud case. We also won that, the book case. We have 2 sports cases coming up. We're going to win both of those too. I think the hearing is in January. Anybody want to go to DC and rally? Let's go. But we're going to win those cases. And then we have 2 cases that should be taken up by the Supreme Court that are very near to Erin Lee, and me, are the secret social transition cases. And we now have 3 judges. We only need a 4 to get that one to be taken up by the Supreme Court, and we will win that too. And the sports cases and the secret social transition cases, they affect the entire country. So there is hope. It's just a long road for those of us in the blue state. That's why it's so important to do your ballot initiative, because you're giving them a run for their money.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you all for being here. I think my question is probably primarily for Dr. Lindsay, but I'd like to hear any other perspectives on it as well. My wife, who's here with me tonight, was a public school teacher here at Putnam Elementary for about 7 years, which is a pretty high trauma school. And so that experience being in the public education system is actually what led us to homeschool our own kids. But one thing we've struggled with is that there were several instances of kids that were genuinely being abused where she was their only recourse and their only safety. And so one of the byproducts of that, safety for all comment that you pointed out is that it seems like it steals that safety from the kids that genuinely do need it. And so I think my 2 questions are, for people that want to get into professions like these for good reasons, what advice do you have for them? And then what options do you see for some of these kids who are kind of having this genuinely needed safe space stolen from them?
So what advice I have is that, this is a very noble sacrifice you're making for your country, your future, and the children that we have. And so I encourage people who are good to try to get into these fields and realize that they're going to, if you're going to major in education, or you're going to major even in law, or you're going to major in almost anything now, that you're going to have to run an academic gauntlet. You're going to go because you need the credential until we have some kind of a change for the credentialing, and you're going to have to get your own education on the side. So you're going to have to work twice as hard. But what you're also going to be able to learn is how the other side thinks while you actually learn how to do the thing that you want to do. And then you can do kind of the reverse of what they did to us. You can enter in, and whether you're there to protect children, whether you're there to be a thorn in the side of the administration, whether you're there to be sand in the gears, whether you're there for whatever other reasons to try to make positive change from within then then you're going to be more equipped for that. But you have to steel yourself before you start. So my advice is to realize what you're getting into, understand that it's a tremendous sacrifice, and that sacrifice is important and worth it. And so we need people that are willing to do that. As for this idea of what do you do for these kids, right? How do you protect them? Well, the bad answer is you don't have a lot of options inside the system right now, but you can create things outside of the system and try to bridge that gap. I know a lot of churches across the country have already been stepping up and trying to find a situation for these young people to be able to meet whatever's happening to them. And a lot of parents are getting informed intentionally so that they can talk to their children and see what's going on and understand the challenges of the day and to prepare the kids for the road that they're going to walk. And so there's a lot of difficulty there. I'm just going to add as a tangent, though, very quickly that, and maybe somebody else has a good answer for what to do. Maybe you have a great answer for what might help these kids. But I'm just going to add as a tangent, it's not just that this harms kids by incident. It is intentional. The program of critical pedagogy, particularly queer pedagogy, intentionally, in the words of Kevin Kumashiro in his paper called Against Repetition that he wrote maybe 2 decades ago, the whole point is to induce strong negative emotions, in his own words, and then structure the environment, an emotional crisis, he calls it. And he says the teacher has a responsibility not only to generate this emotional crisis, but to structure the environment around the learner so that he will resolve the crisis productively in the direction of social justice. In other words, this is a cult initiation through intentional trauma posing as education. And so what we also need to do is get the clarity on what's actually happening and start to bring the levers of either it's the Supreme Court or the legislature or whatever it is to bear on this to protect the kids. But I need you to understand that what's happening in our schools is a deliberate traumatization program in order to create vulnerability and exploit it to bring them into these beliefs. And it's in their own words that is to generate emotional crisis and then manipulate the environment with them. So that is exactly what's happening. It's much worse than just that some kids are getting traumatized by, we can talk about that for 2 hours. It's in fact it is a feature, not a bug of the program. So we all have to do everything that we can to protect kids, to help kids heal, to find if this is the reality, we have to live in the reality that we have and to deal with all of this damage however we can. If the schools are not going to let us do it, we've got to find ways to do it outside of the schools, and we have to try to scale those solutions for people. I think it's absolutely crucial that we do that.
Great, thank you. Go on, Pastor Grant.
Thank you both, or thank you, all 4 of you. You're all 4 warriors, and you're in the fight. And I have appreciated this deeply tonight, so thank you from my heart personally. James, you mentioned once again truth, and all 4 of you here have come to truth. And you've had the courage to look in the mirror and face things personally. And I've heard some of you speak before, and you've had the courage to admit things to yourselves before you told it to others. And I commend you for that. Today, I'm a pastor, and Christianity today just embraced an entirely new woke leader that is corrupt at the core and taking us into Christian communism instead of Christian community. Where do you go? Where did you find truth? I'm saying this to all 4 of you. Number 1, where did you find truth? And where do you go to remain rooted in truth in a world that has gone crazy? Would you like to start?
So the thing that sticks out to me is a quote from a gentleman that has a really long name. But I'll summarize it, but a person's ability to heal is directly correlated to their ability to be honest with themselves. And sometimes that takes a level of compassion and gentleness, and that's usually through introspection and actual healing work. So I not only did therapy, but I took books. I had many different teachers that basically helped me reconnect with myself. Because I don't know what happened. Did you guys hear? I swear that happened. How I stay rooted in that is by not only in situations like this, but it's kind of like once you have seen, you cannot unseen. So I can't go back once I've already known the truth. But it took that ability to be honest with myself. And I would suggest for the parents, for your kids, the best advice I could give to help them stay rooted in reality is the approach. I would suggest looking at motivational interviewing and seeing how that could be very beneficial to having your child basically answer the question you're trying to bring them to, but by themselves. They've been trained to go to war with you, so they already know to do that.
It's a great answer. I would say that this subject is, at some level, so easy as the raccoon example that Dr. Lindsay gave earlier. We all have two parents, and everybody knows that, and I think you have to be convinced otherwise. And I do think being careful about how you get your news and education, that you have friends and stuff that you can push back on you, that critique you, maybe they have different views, and also where your funding comes from. It's hard to convince somebody of the truth if it's going to hurt their pocketbook or their Apple Pay. I don't know how you say that nowadays, but yeah, so I think those are looking at who you owe money and allegiance to is important.
I don't know if I should have a long discussion on epistemology, but we could. Truth, like I mentioned, at least some sorts of truth are very easy to actually stay grounded to. You check. That's how. The example of measuring the room is a tape measure away, and then there you go, you know the answer, right? So there's some very simple ways, and those are good reality checks. I actually find that one of the most important things, you asked how to stay grounded, is to put the phone down, to get off the devices, turn off the TV, and interact with physical reality. I really actually strongly recommend things that have unimportant, most of the time, consequences. A good example is getting dragged out, and I don't even play basketball, but shooting a basketball, because the ball either goes through the hoop or it doesn't, right? You can't lie to yourself about whether it went in, you can't imagine it did. It's actually very important to stay grounded with physical reality. As a pastor, you'd recognize that as connecting to general revelation directly without the filters of some eisegetical method like the news. On the other hand, other truths are more complicated. Moral truths are much more complicated. We have actually practical concerns, political concerns, ethical concerns, moral concerns, theological concerns, philosophical concerns that are all very difficult. And honestly, the best advice, and I think that I turned to this, I was actually thinking just like 2 days ago, just what, I was actually thinking about the Islam question because I had read this Milestones book, and the saying in Islam is that there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet. Therefore, all of the truth is in the Quran as Muhammad allegedly related it, and that's the end of the story, right? And I thought to myself, how brave, how unbelievable is it that Jesus said, know them by their fruits. Go look and see. Be willing to make mistakes and be willing to be humble, but see what the fruits are. Are the philosophies creating good or evil? Are they creating harm or are they creating healing? When we are willing to go and actually see, to try and to test and to see without an agenda, then we can stay grounded. And I actually think that that's incredibly important. So the groundedness is remembering that we're all finite, we're all limited, we're not perfect in any regard whatsoever. So we check ourselves, we bring ourselves back to humility, then you can be grounded. Then you explore the truth, knowing that you're usually wrong and you're doing the best you can. And as Travis and I were talking about over coffee earlier, that you're willing to be completely transparent when you make a mistake and say, look, I was acting in good faith, I was acting in good intention, I made a mistake, here's how I went wrong, here's how I'm going to make amends, and this is how I'm going to do it better going forward. Checking the data better, not circular citations or something like whatever it is. But I think that those are good practices and habits. And to connect to something that's bigger than yourself, bigger than even just a neighborhood or a community, and to really connect to something, you know, that's got deep roots. I think we should be talking about America with the following pronouns: ours, we. You talk about General Washington crossing the Delaware, and we should say things like, we crossed the Delaware that night. We did. And we remember what it cost a lot of people to fight for our freedom and establish this country. We remember that. I think that that kind of a connection to who we are is going to be a crucial factor as well. So these are the kinds of things that I do, the practices that I do. I also do spend an awfully large amount of time on social media, which I don't recommend, but I try not to actually take in the news spin. I try to actually disconnect from that anytime it starts spinning my head a little bit. And like I said, go outside, spend time with family, connect to deeper roots, read an old book before people lost their minds all the way. There's a very old book a lot of people I might recommend read more often. Pastor, you might know which one I'm talking about. And so these things help.
Awesome. We have time for one more. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, it's okay.
So one more quick question, and then you all can have first access at these amazing speakers.
Hi, Erin. Hi, my name is Darius. I'm a father of 5. I'm 36. And when I look around this room and in my experience over the last few years being connected and involved and invited, there's 3 groups of people that I see predominantly not in these environments. It is the father who's my age, right? The father who's my age going up to 45, 47. It's the pastor who's under 50, you know, that 36 to 45, 48 range. And it's the young man, 18 to 22, 23. And so I'm curious, and I don't know which of you will speak to this, but move as you are led. What do you have to say to them? Because when I'm here, all I think about is the consequences of disengagement. But what do you have to say for them? Because they're not here, but they might see this. My wife is recording this. You know, they have to hear something just to at least be here, right? Forget all the other stuff, but I know in my exposure here, it's predominantly women like Erin, women like Kelly, women like you. No offense, some of you older folks, you're all here, you're all active, but we're all either afraid, ignorant, or preoccupied with our responsibilities. So what do you have to say to that?
Well, first of all, let me thank you for coming, because that's awesome. I'm going to speak from the woman's point of view here. We need the men back.
I agree.
We need you. You were pushed away. I know the people who pushed you away. We need you back, and we need you strong, and we need you next to us, because women can't do this without the men. And we need to empower them and tell them that it's okay to be a man and to be masculine and to protect us. I spoke to a group in Philadelphia, and they had daughters that went to University of Pennsylvania when Leah Thompson was swimming as a woman and in those bathrooms. And I don't know if you've listened to Riley Gaines, it takes like 40 minutes to put on one of those bathing suits. And that man was in that bathroom, and all I could think of is my father, if he were alive, what he would have done. But in that stadium, there were like 5 or 6 women holding up signs. Shameful. So we need men. And I invite you to talk to the men, because we need them. Invite them back. We will invite them back. We want them back. We need you there protecting us, because what we do is dangerous. I've had Antifa come up to me. I'm 5'4". I was alone. I've had my picture posted all throughout San Francisco. I've had death threats. But we need the men, and so it's worth your time, because what is the point of having a wonderful family if your family's going to be ripped apart from you? Because that's what this ideology does. It rips it apart. So you can work hard, so you have to sacrifice. I sacrificed my entire career. Right. I almost sacrificed my marriage. And I almost sacrificed my daughter because I wouldn't bow to the ideology, and she hated me. You have to be willing to sacrifice. And what is more important than the innocence of a child? Nothing. I can think of nothing. And so if men won't stand up for children, they have no morality, and they're no longer men. So come on back, men. We need you.
Since you asked what I would say to them, I would tell them that the contribution that they could make is missed, and it matters. They have a contribution. It would be so welcomed. It is missed, and it matters. A lot of them may feel disengaged because they feel like they're, black-pilled and they can't make a difference. Exactly wrong. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Get in the game. You're making a difference. You have no idea what influence you're going to have on other people. You have no idea how what you do might grow or scale in unexpected ways. I can tell you, I didn't expect to be sitting in a place like this 5 years ago or 8 years ago. You don't know what is going to happen when you get involved. So their contributions are missed. Their contributions matter, and they are more than welcome. We would be thrilled to see more people getting involved and stepping up. So that's what I would tell them. We want you here. We want your voice. We want your effort. We know you can make a difference, and we would be grateful to have it.
I think you have a very good question, and if you have time afterwards, sometime I'd love to hear more of your ideas, because I bet you have your own ideas of this. And I don't have a full answer, and theirs were great, and I agree with theirs. I'm going to give just a 0.5% answer that I realized after maybe a year or two of wondering this, and that's, people like Erin have a really great husband that's like working and quiet and just keeping his head down and puts up with this. I can only do this because my wife, I was like, hey, I could lose my board of certification, probably not, but maybe, and we'd lose our house, will you divorce me? And she was like, no. And I was like, in fact, kind of come back either on your shield or with it, And so a lot of these leading women, have somebody like that is, going through many of the same emotional struggles and stuff and taking the same financial risks. I'd say that too about Christians. Have been very disappointed to not see people of faith speak up. And I also heard and to be fair to the minority party here tonight, I've also been very disappointed in obviously the Democrats, let's just be honest, but also a lot of people that I've shared the stage with, or that that I see leading out, they're Christian and they're just not making a huge deal of it, or they used to be a Democrat and they learned, so there are, I give just a 0.5% answers that there are some of those people out there, so don't lose complete faith, but I want to hear more from you. Sorry.
Just to piggyback off that, I just want to quote scripture, James chapter 4, verse 17. For him who knows the right thing to do and does not do it, it is sin.
Woo, that's a good place to end it. Thank you, Darius. Thank you so much. All right, real quick, we have a call to action now. And first, before I get to that, our friend Jennifer Say, who is the chair of the Girls Sports Issue Committee, she's got a table out there with great merchandise. She wanted to make sure that all of our speakers are decked out in XXXY. And I want to do a really quick exercise before we leave. So if you are a Protect Kids Colorado petition captain, leader, board member, will you please just stand? This is a full-time job. People leading teams of hundreds of people. Yvonne Paez is our general. She built an army of over 1,500 volunteers who are in all 64 counties gathering signatures. It's truly a full-time job for her. We could not do it without her and all of the people who are captains. If you are currently carrying a petition, a circulator, will you raise your hand? That's so cool. All right, last question. If you know 20 to 40 people, raise your hand. There's 20 in here, so it's all of you. That's the only qualification to be a petition circulator. That's it. You don't even have to be a Colorado resident. You just have to be 18 years of age and know 20 to 40 people, and you can be part of this movement. We have about 10 weeks left to get these ballot measures on the ballot. I'm going to be really honest about numbers. In my prediction, we need at least another 100,000 signatures volunteer. That means every single church in this state needs to activate, or we need at least $250,000 to purchase the signatures and not just do it all volunteer. So every person who takes a petition counts, every signature counts. If you think you can only get 5 signatures, great, take a petition. 5 is better than 0. And every dollar towards this effort counts. As they alluded to, we would be the first state, the first blue state to pass these laws. 27 states have passed a ban on surgery for kids and protecting girls' sports. None of them are blue states. We would be the first. We would be the first state to do this by the will of the people. Those 27 states went through their state legislature. We all know we can't do that here. We've got some great reps. They're in a super minority. So it is up to us, the people, and only up to us to make this change in our state. It's not just legislative change, it's cultural change. It's starting conversations. It's educating your neighbor. How many of you learned something here today? Please go out and share that with your neighbors. Please take a petition before you leave. I welcome you to donate as you leave outside the door. And just one more round of applause for these amazing speakers. Thank you so much.